The cause of all suffering in the world, the Buddha's Four Noble Truths. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. Many people have wondered, why is this life so full of suffering? How can I be free from suffering? To be free from suffering, we must first understand what suffering is and where it comes from. Then we can find a way out of it. These questions were precisely the content of the very first discourse the Buddha gave after his enlightenment. Do not miss this video if you want to understand your own suffering and that of humankind. After 11 years of arduous search for the path, Shakyamuni Buddha attained great enlightenment following 49 days of resolute meditation under the Bodhi tree. However, the world-honored one hesitated over whether or not to disseminate the teaching he had just realized to sentient beings, as his teaching was so profound and subtle. While most beings had limited capacity and could not quickly awaken in the same way he had, yet it was inconceivable not to teach, simply because the Dharma was too deep and wondrous. In order to fulfill his mission of guiding and transforming beings, the Buddha chose the method of gradual teaching. He first expounded the Four Noble Truths so that sentient beings could easily understand and practice, thereby establishing the fundamental basis for wisdom. In the sutra, in 42 sections translated during the later Han Dynasty in China by masters Kasyapa Matanga and Dharmaraksa, there is an introductory passage that reads, "The world-honored one, upon attaining enlightenment, reflected, 'Free from desire and in serene stillness is the supreme state of meditation. After subduing the path of Mara, in the deer park, he turned the wheel of the Four Truths, liberating the 5 ascetics, including Kandanya, to realize the fruit of the path.' This passage can be simply understood as follows. After attaining enlightenment, Shakyamuni Buddha reflected, 'Departing from lustful desires brings the foremost tranquility. Realizing the state of perfect and complete enlightenment, dwelling in meditative concentration, he subdued and transcended all demonic forces. Observing that the 5 former companions who had practiced austerities with him, the group led by Kondinya, had sufficient capacity to awaken through the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha went to the deer park, where they were practicing, and taught them the Four Noble Truths. Living in suffering but recognizing its cause and firmly addressing it will lead to the end of suffering, even to the complete eradication of all anguish. There are indeed people in this world who do exactly that, and they serve as bright examples for everyone to awaken themselves. The Buddha calls those who, though living in suffering, know their suffering, treat it, alleviate it, and end it, people of wisdom, those who live in accordance with the wondrous Dharma of the Four Noble Truths. Such was the first teaching that the Buddha expounded to the 5 ascetics led by Kaundinya. They lived in suffering, yet remained at peace, because they thoroughly understood the law of cause and effect, maintained mindfulness in both practice and daily life, and in that sense were manifestations of bodhisattvas or Buddhas. Whether it was physical illness or any other affliction, they viewed it all through the lens of karma, leading them to cultivate compassion for themselves and others. To have compassion for oneself, one must fear creating causes of suffering like a bodhisattva rather than waiting until the painful consequences arise and then becoming afraid, which is the way ordinary beings behave. A concise saying goes, "Bodhisattvas fear the causes, living beings fear the results. One should recite it often to cultivate loving kindness towards self and others. If you know that killing is creating the cause for sickness and death, the cause of separation and suffering, you will not kill, because sooner or later you will experience that painful retribution, as precisely fearing the cause. Waiting until you are thrown in prison or someone you love is harmed, or you are sentenced to death, and only then fearing it would be too late. After listening to the Buddha teach the Four Noble Truths, the 5 ascetics' delusions were shattered, and supramundane wisdom appeared. They became awakened and attained the fruit of arahantship. These were the first 5 disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha. In the Samyukta Agama, the Buddha taught his disciples, "Bhikkhus, do not concern yourselves with thoughts like whether the world is finite or infinite. Those things are not essential. What matters is that I teach you about suffering, the cause of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. These are beneficial because they certainly lead you to the ultimate goal of enlightenment and liberation." According to the Buddha's words, the Four Noble Truths are regarded as the foundation of Buddhism. Shakyamuni Buddha taught them to his disciples so they would clearly understand a very worldly truth. Though it is straightforward and easy to grasp, it is at the same time extremely profound. Understanding and practicing the Four Noble Truths will surely bring peace of mind. In Buddhist thought, the Four Truths, or the Four Noble Truths, is the basic teaching that puts human beings at the center and is carried out for their sake. The Buddha perceived the wholesome potential in all sentient beings that they possess the Buddha nature. If they practice the right Dharma, they can all attain Buddhahood. All sentient beings without exception have the Buddha nature. Out of boundless compassion, wanting to save sentient beings, the Buddha revealed his teaching. This is the doctrine the Buddha expounded early on, so it is also called the teaching of the early school or original teaching. The Four Noble Truths were systematically arranged by the Buddha in a way that is methodical, scientific, astute, reasonable, and appropriate. Even today, more than 2,500 years later, Western scholars of Buddhism, when discussing the Four Noble Truths, praise not only its profound meaning and accurate insights, but also its brilliant architecture, its structure, its sequential layout throughout the entire teaching as presented by the World-Honored One. First, the Buddha indicates the present distress of the world, the tragic state of affairs right before our eyes, in our ears, and even within ourselves. These truths can be perceived by seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. They are not some strange, distant, unfamiliar truths. Anyone who is a living being is subject to birth, sickness, old age, and death. All of these conditions are accompanied by suffering. Having a body inevitably involves suffering. This is an obvious and simple fact that no one can deny or fail to notice. Once the Buddha has made clear how suffering is so glaringly present before our very eyes around us and within each one of us, he moves on to the second stage, pointing out the source and cause of all that suffering. From the immediate moment, he traces back to the past, from superficial appearances down to deeper layers, from what is easy to see to what is hard to see, from what is considered lofty and profound to what becomes simple. His fundamental and solid logic is grounded in practical realities and specific capacities, verifiable truths, nothing alien, fanciful, or vague. At the third stage, the Buddha presents the state of peace that arises when suffering is gone, contrasting with the first stage. The more misery is depicted in the first stage, the greater the joy shown in this third stage. The realm of delight he describes is neither hazy nor far-fetched. If suffering exists, then its opposite joy must exist, for pleasure and pain always accompany one another. Only by clearly recognizing what suffering is like does one become eager to escape it and yearn for the joyful liberation that the Buddha has introduced. Finally, the fourth stage is where the Buddha explains the methods for actualizing this blissful state. Here, we should note that he describes the realm of liberation first, then explains the method of practice. This is a skillful way of teaching that aligns with basic human psychology. Before telling people to set out on a journey, you must show them the goal, what it looks like, and let them decide whether to proceed. If they realize that the destination is precious and beneficial to them, only then will they eagerly and tirelessly strive to reach it. The Four Noble Truths is the Chinese rendering of the original Sanskrit Katur Arya Satya, also sometimes translated as the Four Realities or the Four Sublime Truths. Four indicates the number 4. Noble or wondrous suggests something supreme, skillful, and miraculously effective. Truths signifies firmly grounded truths, unchanging principles, statements that always accord with reality. The Four Noble Truths are 4 truths that no one can refute. These 4 truths, which make up the fundamental doctrine, are the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering. These are the essential teachings, and no Buddhist can ignore them. Not knowing anything about the Four Noble Truths means not knowing anything about Buddhist doctrine. More than anyone else, a Buddhist must thoroughly grasp that life is suffering. To accomplish this, there is no better way than to listen to the Buddha's teachings on the truth of suffering, dukkha, for this explains in detail and with accuracy every aspect of suffering in the world. After recognizing the various forms of suffering, we must investigate why they arise and where they come from. Only by discovering their origin can we eliminate them at the root. Nowhere is this elucidated more clearly and precisely than in the truth of the origin of suffering, Samadaya. If one recognizes the many pains of this world and understands their deepest causes, but then becomes merely pessimistic, weeping and wailing for rescue, that would be the height of negativity and despair. Some critics mistakenly think Buddhism is pessimistic and negative because they stop only at the first 2 stages of the Four Noble Truths. True Buddhists do not stop there. They develop compassion, wisdom, and courage. Seeing and knowing how suffering darkens life, they dare to face and eradicate it. Happiness does not come from nowhere. The arising of happiness corresponds directly to the decline of suffering. Just as when darkness recedes, light takes its place. If you want to witness the light of nirvana, put into practice what the Buddha taught in the truth of the cessation of suffering, nirodha. If you wish to realize nirvana, you must have the necessary means. The Buddha has provided them completely and precisely in the truth of the path, magga. The truth of suffering. Life is an ocean of suffering. The truth of suffering is the undeniable reality that lays out all the pain existing in this world, which every sentient being has to endure. These countless types of suffering engulf and overwhelm us like an ocean. Suffering here does not only mean bodily pain or hardship, but also mental anguish, a restless mind unsatisfied with its inner desires. Buddhist thought analyzes and recognizes that from birth to death, suffering never truly abates. The moment one is born, one bursts into tears. If life is happy, why not come with a smile? The universe and all phenomena continually undergo the cycle of arising, abiding, decaying, and ceasing. Likewise, our bodies must pass through the stages of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Each of these carries the mark of suffering. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Illness is suffering. Death is suffering. In social life, many other forms of suffering also manifest. Not getting what one wishes is suffering. Separation from loved ones is suffering. Living with those we dislike is suffering. The suffering of the five aggregates, i.e., attachment to form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. These are the 8 fundamental sufferings of human beings, called the 8 sufferings. In Buddhism, it is taught that the sufferings in the 3 realms are born from karmic causes in the past and are re-experienced in the present. To be born a human is already suffering, not to mention being reborn as an animal or falling into the hells or hungry ghost realms. However, every form of existence fundamentally includes suffering. Yet suffering emerges from our own mind and body. We cannot solely blame karmic fate for it, nor should we sink into despair. Even though suffering is ultimately just a psychological phenomenon without intrinsic reality, it still incessantly affects and controls every aspect of our existence. Buddhist teachings often mention the 3 sufferings and the 8 sufferings. The 3 sufferings and the 8 sufferings are the primary causes of the deep, continuous distress that plagues humanity. Let us first explore the 3 sufferings. 1. Suffering of suffering. This is suffering piled on top of more suffering. Life itself is already suffering, yet adverse external circumstances bring endless additional afflictions. Sentient beings are constantly tormented by unwelcome events, enduring physical and mental anguish and never finding relief. Trouble never comes alone. Fortune seldom knocks twice. 2. Suffering of change. This refers to our active intentions and volitions that prompt acts of body, speech, and mind, what Buddhist teachings call mental formations. These psychological processes are highly proactive. They give rise to consciousness, driving us to create karma and reap its results. These mental formations are so subtle and hidden that it is hard to perceive them, yet they govern all our actions, whether good, bad, or neutral. Hence, these mental formations have enormous power. They create karma, carrying sentient beings along the river of birth and death, leading them to perpetual suffering. 3. Suffering of decay. This is the misery of destruction that results in sorrow. All things in the universe go through transformation and decay, none remaining unchanging or eternal. The Buddha called this the suffering of decay, or the ocean of suffering in life. This is impermanence. The inevitable transience of all phenomena stirs feelings of nostalgia and distress, repeating itself in our hearts. Everything in the universe degrades in the passage of time. All material forms are helpless before change. Even mountains and rivers transform. Old landmarks and palaces fade. Human beings themselves degrade far more quickly. Therefore, the Buddha teaches us not to cling to this impermanent life. More deeply, Buddhism approaches life by observing it directly, reflecting a practical worldview. Sentient beings are influenced by external factors that interact with their subconscious tendencies, thus giving rise to the self-fixation and the illusion of a unique me. The 5 aggregates form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness are the conditions that lead to our suffering. Suffering arises out of ignorance in our own minds. We remain in the dark about the true nature of things, so we suffer. Craving and ignorance generate suffering. The root of birth and death samsara lies in these afflictions and wrong views, desire, greed, anger, delusion, and all harmful mental states that disturb our bodies and minds. The truth of the origin of suffering. The truth of the origin of suffering describes the real cause of worldly misery, explaining how it arises. If the truth of suffering is like a list of symptoms, the truth of the origin is like a chart analyzing their causes, habits, and attachments consolidated over infinite past lives. These ingrained habits manifest as the physical, temporal world and as our mental tendencies. Habits lead to mental creations. That which is commonly called material existence, including cultural norms and science, is described in Buddhism as mundane projections of consciousness. In the Mahayana treatise Changwaishi Lun, Discourse on the Perfection of Consciousness Only, there is the saying, "The 3 realms are only mind. The myriad dharmas are only consciousness." All phenomena, material or immaterial, visible or invisible, arise from consciousness rather than exist in an absolute sense. The truth of the origin of suffering tracks down these causes, seeking the roots of suffering through the law of cause and effect, along with the 12 links of dependent origination, which bring about suffering. The 12 links of dependent origination is a contemplative method in the teaching of the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle. It illuminates how all phenomena and the cycle of birth and death itself arise from conditions. When conditions converge, something is said to arise. When conditions disperse, that thing ceases. In reality, there is no actual arising or ceasing. Even before the Buddha's appearance in the world, there were already practitioners known as solitary realizers, Pratyeka Buddhas, who understood and awakened to this law of conditionality and transcended birth and death on their own. When the Buddha recognized certain disciples had the capacity for contemplations on dependent origination, he taught them the 12 links of dependent origination, so they could attain the fruit of Pratyeka Buddhas. These 12 links form an unbroken chain, moving from one link to the next, in one lifetime and across many lifetimes. 1. Ignorance. 2. Mental formations. 3. Consciousness. 4. Name and form. 5. 6 sense bases. 6. Contact. 7. Feeling. 8. Craving. 9. Clinging. 10. Becoming. 11. Birth. 12. Old age and death. A clear understanding of these causes, how they trigger one another, and employing contemplations on dependent arising can unravel key links in the chain, especially craving, clinging, and becoming, leading to emancipation in the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle. 1. Ignorance. Not seeing clearly, living in delusion, failing to recognize the true nature of dependent arising. One does not see that all phenomena, body and environment, appearance and disappearance, subject and object, existence and non-existence arise and pass based on causes and conditions, transforming like illusions. Mistaking them as actually real, one takes them as a personal self and interacts with the world in a cycle of birth and death. 2. Mental formations. This is the constantly shifting mental activity that arises from ignorance. It gives rise to what we mistake for a personal mind, which then creates karma and eventually must bear karmic consequences. 3. Consciousness. Continuously moving mental processes link karmic causes to rebirth in specific forms of life, shaping the mind's experiences in each lifetime. 4. Name and form. Through consciousness aligned with one's karma, form, physical presence, and name, mental aspects, come into being. Thus, the consciousness experiences the body and world corresponding to its karmic destiny. 5. 6. Sense bases. Once a being has mind and form, it then develops eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, which come into contact with sense objects, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile objects, and mental objects. 6. Contact. The 6 faculties operate and connect with external objects, giving rise to contact between consciousness and the sense objects. 7. Feeling. Contact produces feelings painful, pleasant, joyful, sad, or neutral. 8. Craving. Once feelings arise, likes and dislikes emerge. Pleasant feelings trigger liking. Unpleasant feelings trigger aversion. These responses intensify the attachment to body and mind. 9. Clinging. Attachment strengthens, thereby solidifying one's mistaken view that phenomena are real, reinforcing the belief in a self and fixed reality. 10. Becoming. When the mind clings in that way, it treats experiences as truly existent self and others, creation of karma and retribution, and the process of existence unfolds. 11. Birth. Since one believes in real existence, one undergoes what is perceived as birth. Put differently, the ignorance of dependent arising causes us to see genuine birth. 12. Old age and death. Following birth inevitably come old age and death. This series of 12 conditions is a chain extending across lifetimes. Due to ignorance and mental formations in the past, consciousness arises in the present. Consciousness then leads to name and form, which leads to the 6 sense bases, contact and feeling. These 5 components, consciousness, name and form, 6 sense bases, contact, and feeling, are the direct results of past karma, called retribution. Hence, origin, samudaya, implies accumulation, the gathering of causes in continuity. Thus, if in the past or the present, a person fails to recognize life's suffering or the impermanent and illusory nature of phenomena, and remains oblivious to the fact that intentions, speech, and actions produce karmic outcomes, then that person accumulates more harmful actions due to ignorant thinking, strengthening the cycle of birth and death. In short, the Buddha taught that because ignorance blinds us, we do not see the true appearance of things. Consequently, we chase ephemeral illusions and accumulate karma. This is the root cause of suffering, with three poisons, greed, anger, and delusion, serving as the primary sources of suffering. Ultimately, any action, good or bad, creates karma, tying us to samsara in the three realms, while the enormous mass of such karma is called the truth of the origin of suffering. The truth of the cessation of suffering. The truth of the cessation of suffering is a definite fact that describes the peaceful and wholesome state that sentient beings attain once they have eradicated suffering and its causes. It can be likened to a doctor's confident pronouncement about a patient's full recovery once the illness is correctly treated. Having recognized the suffering of the world and discovered its source, the Buddha then speaks of cessation, affirming that one who overcomes craving experiences a state of well-being. After emerging from the delirium of suffering, the patient regains health and can eat and sleep in peace, with a vigorous body and calm mind. Thus, to transcend the illness of suffering, we must uproot our tenacious habit of attachment, cultivated over countless lifetimes. We must realize the inherent emptiness of phenomena, what Buddhism calls the extinguished state or nirvana. In short, cessation signifies enlightenment, free from clinging. The Chan Zen school calls this seeing one's true nature and attaining Buddhahood. Having broken all attachments, a practitioner's spiritual power can surpass physical reality. One gains mastery over birth and death, becoming the master of the six senses and six forms of consciousness, acquiring the six supernatural abilities. Miraculous powers, the ability to move or manifest at will. Divine eye, seeing across realms and distances. Divine ear, hearing what is afar. Knowing others' minds, telepathy. Recall of past lives, knowing past and future existences. Extinction of all defilements, the complete end of birth and death. Some sages in history have transformed their physical bodies into incorruptible relics as testimony for future generations. Master Huineng and others, for instance, left their bodies intact without embalming. One can still see them enshrined at Nanhua Temple, Caosi, near the town of Zengate in Guangdong, China. Huineng's body has remained for 1,000 years without any artificial preservation. Those who follow the Pratyekabuddha vehicle often reflect that all phenomena, whether body or environment, life or death, arise from conditional causes and lack inherent existence. They see that all things are interdependent and have no fixed nature. By correctly perceiving this, they realize the non-self of all phenomena, body, mind, surroundings, birth, and death. They constantly abide in concentration, observing form as reflections in a mirror, sound as a passing breeze, empty of substantial reality. Having extinguished all grasping and aversion, they see that when birth occurs, it is not truly birth. When death occurs, it is not truly death. Hence, they awaken to the principle of non-self and exit the cycle of rebirth. In practicing the 12 links of dependent origination to transcend samsara, meditators focus on craving, clinging, and becoming the key moments that perpetuate cyclical existence. They discern that all sense contacts and feelings are illusory. Recognizing the emptiness of liking and disliking, the sense of self diminishes until it vanishes. Freed from the illusions of birth and death, they gain the primal insight of non-self, and with consistent practice, They eradicate the mental formations that support ignorance, moving from initial insights to complete liberation. This is the attainment of the Pratyekabuddha vehicle. By recognizing the illusory nature of phenomena that they arise, transform, and cease dependent on conditions, these practitioners can also manifest miraculous powers, using them to benefit sentient beings. Their insight into dependent origination is thus broader than that of the Shravaka vehicle, aligning them more closely with the path of the Bodhisattva. For this reason, some texts refer to the Pratyekabuddha as the middle vehicle between the small vehicle, Hinayana, and the great vehicle, Mahayana. If they develop a vow for universal salvation, they can rapidly attain the higher fruit of Mahayana. Those who have genuinely awakened rarely display their supernatural abilities. However, a few extraordinary individuals may exhibit certain feats before fully realizing non-attachment. Yet the ultimate principle remains that true awakened beings do not cling to such powers. The truth of the cessation of suffering teaches that once suffering is eliminated, liberation is achieved. Cessation refers to quiescence or nirvana, meaning that karma is ended, birth and death are transcended. Free from the seeds of future suffering, one attains genuine peace. When afflictions are extinguished, the karmic energies sustaining the three realms are also extinguished. If one still possesses a physical body, such a state is called the nirvana with remainder. At the end of this life, relinquishing the physical form, one enters final nirvana, nirvana without remainder, where all future rebirths are ended. This realm of nirvana is supremely quiet, peaceful, and free from the cycle of suffering, known as the truth of the cessation of suffering. However, merely eliminating the afflictions born of an agitated mind is not enough for lasting peace. We must still ensure we maintain the fruits of this release without lapsing into old habits. Therefore, the Buddha revealed the truth of the path. The truth of the path. The truth of the path presents the correct, definitive methods for eradicating suffering. It is the undeniable principle and the finger that points to the moon, the means leading one to nirvana. Simply put, these are the Buddhist methods of practice to remove the root causes of suffering and attain well-being. It is analogous to a prescription written by a skilled doctor, instructing the patient on the exact medicines to take and how to take them, ensuring a full recovery. The truth of the path comprises the righteous path's clear and proven methods that eradicate attachment and lead to awakening and liberation. It teaches how to extinguish the causes of suffering and shows the way to freedom. Even if we know where suffering comes from and why it exists, if we lack a method, we remain mired in pain. Thus, the truth of the path is the most crucial part of the Four Truths. Path here signifies a road or a proper approach. It also has the meaning of unimpeded progress. It is the fundamental roadmap for practitioners seeking to transcend the suffering of the three realms. Within it, the Buddha outlined 8 correct ways. 1. Right view. 2. Right thought. 3. Right speech. 4. Right action. 5. Right livelihood. 6. Right effort. 7. Right mindfulness. 8. Right concentration. These 8 principles are collectively known as the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is extremely practical for both individual and societal well-being, and it also affects future destinies. It helps people transform themselves and improve their environment. Altogether, there are also the 37 Aids to Enlightenment that assist and harmonize with the Noble Eightfold Path, ensuring sentient beings can definitely cross beyond suffering and enter nirvana. Hence, this is the truth of the path. Buddhist practice aimed at liberation can follow diverse methods. The Buddha mentioned 84,000 Dharma doors, a symbolic number. Anyone who finds a method that suits them and sincerely dedicates themselves to it can attain awakening, because the Buddha nature is the same in all. However, regardless of which method one follows, the foundational discipline, precepts, concentration, and wisdom form the core and essence of the path.